fluorescent lights of Roland Medical cast harsh shadows across the marble floors as Ava Collins hurried through the corridor at nearly midnight. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished surface, a sound that seemed to echo her desperation. In her trembling hands, she clutched a small white box containing the prescription pills that would grant her grandmother a few precious hours of peaceful sleep. Ava had been working double shifts for 3 weeks straight, her eyes burning from exhaustion, her body running on nothing but black coffee and determination. The temporary nursing contract at Manhattan's most prestigious private medical facility was her lifeline. Even if it barely covered the mounting medical bills that threatened to drown her and Ruth in debt, she rounded the corner too quickly. Mind focused on reaching room 314, where Mrs. Patterson waited for her evening medication. The heavy mahogany door to the executive wing swung open without warning, and Ava collided with what felt like a wall of expensive fabric and cold authority. The box flew from her hands, pills scattering across the marble like tiny white promises broken. Her palm landed squarely on a broad chest, feeling the warmth of skin beneath perfectly pressed cotton. For a heartbeat, she felt only the rapid thudding of her own pulse in her ears. Then came the voice, low and sharp as winter wind cutting through. "Glass, did you think touching me there would get you anywhere, Miss Collins?" Ava's head snapped up, meeting eyes so cold they seemed to freeze the very air between them. Ethan Roland stood before her, CEO of Roland Medical Corporation. The man whose name alone could reshape careers and destroy lives with equal ease. His black suit was immaculate except for the slight wrinkle where her desperate fingers had grabbed him. "I'm sorry, sir. It was an accident, I swear." Her voice cracked. But she forced herself to stand straight, even as her knees threatened to buckle. Ethan stepped closer, his shadow swallowing hers under the harsh lights. Several nurses at the far end of the hallway froze, not one daring to speak. Everyone knew better than to interrupt Ethan Roland when he was about to deliver judgment.
"One touch."
His words were barely above a whisper, yet they pressed against her throat like cold steel. "You think you can climb that high with a single touch?" Ava shook her head frantically, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered pills. Her fingers slipped on the smooth marble, but she refused to let tears fall. "It's not here. Not in front of the man who looked at her like she was dirt on imported leather." Ethan bent down, his face close enough for her to see the faint roughness of stubble and something dangerous flickering behind his sharp gaze. He picked up one pill between 2 fingers and placed it in her palm. His touch was ice cold, yet the brief contact sent an electric shock through her that made breathing impossible. "You will pay, Miss Collins," he murmured so only she could hear, "in ways you cannot even imagine yet." Then he was gone, leaving only the echo of expensive shoes on marble and the weight of a promise that felt more like a threat. The nurses quickly returned to their work, pretending nothing had happened. But Ava could still feel the tension crackling in the air as she stumbled toward her patient's room. One touch. One stupid accidental touch that might have just changed everything. Ava Collins had never truly belonged in the polished world of Roland Medical, where white marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the scent of expensive cologne drifted through the air like an unspoken warning. She came from a cramped apartment in Brooklyn, where paint peeled from walls in winter meant choosing between heat and food. Her grandmother Ruth was all she had left, a fragile heartbeat that kept Ava tethered to this unforgiving city. Every night, she wore the same pale blue uniform, moving like a ghost through corridors where miracles happened for those who could afford them. While girls like Ava survived on 12-hour shifts and overdue bills, Ethan Roland existed in a different universe entirely. At 32, he commanded respect and fear in equal measure from his penthouse office overlooking Fifth Avenue. He had rebuilt Roland Medical from the ashes of his father's sudden death, turning cold profit into a living empire that stretched across 3 states. But success came with whispers that followed him through every boardroom and charity gala. Some claimed Ethan Roland was incapable of human warmth, that something fundamental was broken inside him. Doctors had been consulted behind closed doors, their failed attempts sealed in files thicker than phone books. The medical reports spoke of a condition that made physical intimacy impossible. A cruel irony for a man who controlled an empire built on healing. Henry Roland, Ethan's grandfather and the family patriarch, had one dying wish: to see the Roland name continue through blood. His voice echoed through every shareholder meeting, every family dinner where silver cutlery clinked against fine china while threats were delivered with perfect politeness. "If Ethan cannot give me a grandson," Henry had declared just last month, "then perhaps Gregory would be better suited to lead this family forward." Gregory Roland, Ethan's uncle, smiled whenever those words were repeated. A man with soft words and calculating eyes, he had been planting seeds of doubt about his nephew's capabilities for months. Each whispered rumor about Ethan's condition grew stronger. Each failed relationship became ammunition in a war for control of the Roland Empire. Dr. Harris, bought with promises of research funding, had been particularly helpful in spreading the narrative that Ethan Roland was frigid in every sense of the word. The more the rumors spread, the more shareholders questioned their young CEO's ability to secure the family's future. Then there was Charlotte Gray, the senator's daughter with perfect hair and political connections, who believed Ethan's coldness was simply a matter of time and strategy. She would give Henry the grandchild he wanted and Gregory the puppet he needed. Her engagement ring was already picked out. She simply needed Ethan to realize he had no other choice. But none of these power games mattered to Ava. She only knew Ethan Roland as the name on paychecks that barely covered rent. To her, he was just another powerful stranger she would never have reason to speak to, until her hand slipped that night, until the cold fabric of his suit burned her palm more than any fire could. Now every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, sharp and questioning, as if he was trying to decide whether to destroy her or keep her close like an inconvenient truth. Back in her small apartment, Ava tiptoed around stacks of medical bills and empty pill bottles. Ruth's labored breathing was the only sound filling the silence. Every day, Ava promised her grandmother that things would get better, that this city wouldn't consume them the way it had devoured her parents when debt collectors came knocking. Some nights she dreamed of escaping Manhattan, of warm places without marble floors or cold eyes, watching her every mistake. But every morning she put on the uniform again, because hope was expensive and leaving cost more than staying. So she stayed. She survived. She promised herself that no man in $1,000 suit would ever make her beg for mercy. Not even Ethan Roland. Somewhere across the city, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse office, staring out at lights that twinkled like fallen stars. He remembered the warmth of her touch, not because he wanted to, but because it terrified him that he had wanted it. For the first time in years, something had stirred inside him that felt dangerously close to desire. In his head, Gregory's poisonous voice hummed, while Charlotte's perfume clung to his sleeves like a promise he didn't want to keep. The ghost of his father's betrayal lingered in every polished surface, reminding him that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. He clenched his jaw and whispered to the empty room that no girl from Brooklyn could bring him down, no matter what part of him she had awakened with her accidental touch. Ava stood at the end of the corridor the next evening, staring at the polished brass nameplate on the heavy wooden door that separated her from Ethan Roland. She hadn't planned to return. She had planned to disappear into the endless stream of nurses and patients, letting her mistake fade into someone else's story. But the hospital administrator's voice that afternoon still rang in her ears, cold and final, informing her that her hours had been cut with no explanation. Her name had been erased from the next month's schedule as if she had never existed. They didn't say it was Ethan Roland's doing, but everyone knew his displeasure had no limits and no mercy. She had promised Ruth that she would bring home the new pills tonight.
Ow.
Medications the insurance refused to cover. Without them, her grandmother would spend another sleepless night writhing in pain that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. So here she was, one trembling hand clutching the prescription slip, the other pressed against her chest, trying to calm the panic that made her vision blur. She knocked once, heard nothing, then pushed the door open before her courage dissolved. Ethan sat behind a wide black desk that seemed to swallow him in shadows. Despite the city lights glittering through the wall of glass that turned his office into a throne above the world, he didn't look up immediately, his attention fixed on a document. But Ava saw the tightness in his shoulders, the slight twitch in his jaw that suggested he had known she would come. When he finally lifted his gaze, those same ice-cold eyes pinned her in place. "You have 1 minute, Miss Collins." His voice was dangerously calm. "I need my hours back." Her voice shook but remained clear. "I need this job, Mr. Roland. My grandmother is dying. Can't pay for her treatment without this work. Please." Ethan's fingers drummed once against the desk edge, the only sound between them besides the distant hum of the city below. He rose slowly, walking around the desk until he stopped close enough for her to see the faint shadows under his eyes, the lines of exhaustion carved into a face that should have looked untouched by human suffering. "We think your apology buys back what you took from me." His tone never rose, never broke, yet it pressed the air tighter around her throat. "You touched me, Miss Collins. You took from me in a way no one has for years. Do you know what that means?" Ava shook her head, unable to answer because his words made no sense, yet the heat behind his gaze made her stomach twist with something deeper than fear. "I didn't take anything, sir. It was an accident, I swear," she whispered, clutching the prescription slip until it crumpled in her palm. Ethan studied her in silence, his eyes flickering between the paper and her face, as if measuring her for a punishment she couldn't comprehend. "You want your hours back?" Each word was measured, deliberate, then earn them. "You'll work directly for me from now on. No more shifts, no more wards. You'll report here every night until I say otherwise." Ava stared at him, the words refusing to make sense. "What do you mean, work for you? I'm a nurse, sir." "I'm not. You think too highly of your innocence, Miss Collins." His voice cut through her protest like a blade. "Broke something inside me the moment you touched me. You will fix it, or you will pay for it." She stepped back, bumping into the edge of the desk. The city lights behind him turned his figure into a silhouette of sharp edges and dangerous promises. "I don't understand," she breathed. "I don't know how to fix anything like that." Ethan's hand lifted but didn't touch her, hovering near her cheek close enough that she felt the heat radiating from his skin. Her heartbeat stuttered against her ribs before he pulled back, as if the effort cost him more than she could see. "You'll learn, Miss Collins." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You want your grandmother to sleep peacefully tonight? You'll learn." The prescription slip fell from her nerveless fingers as the full weight of his proposition settled over her. She had come here desperate for her job back and found herself trapped in something far more complicated and dangerous than she could have imagined. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" The question escaped before she could stop it. A smile ghosted across Ethan's lips, but it held no warmth. "I'm asking you to help me become the man everyone believes I should be. Starting tomorrow night, you'll discover just how broken I really am, and you'll help me fix it. One touch at a time." The room seemed to shrink around them as the implications of his words sank in. Ava realized she was standing at the edge of a precipice, and the only choice was to jump or watch her grandmother suffer. She bent down, picked up the crumpled prescription, and met his gaze with a steadiness that surprised them both. "Fine, but I want my grandmother's medical bills covered completely, and I want it in writing." For the first time since she'd known of his existence, Ethan Roland looked genuinely surprised. Then something that might have been respect flickered in his cold eyes. "Deal, Miss Collins. Welcome to your new position." 3 weeks into her new arrangement with Ethan Roland, Ava began to understand the true depth of his condition. What she had initially dismissed as coldness revealed itself as something far more complex and heartbreaking. Each evening in his private office, she discovered layers of a man who had been systematically broken by years of medical procedures, family expectations, and his own body's refusal to respond normally to human touch. The sessions began simply enough. Ethan would sit rigid in his chair while Ava, following instructions from Dr. Matthews, a discreet specialist Ethan had flown in from Switzerland, would place her hands on his shoulders or arms. The goal was to gradually desensitize him to physical contact, to rewire neural pathways that had shut down after years of trauma. But something unexpected was happening. Each time Ava's warm hands made contact with his skin, Ethan's carefully constructed walls cracked a little more. The man who had commanded boardrooms with ice-cold precision began to tremble at her gentle touch. More shocking still, for the first time in over a decade, his body began to respond. It's working. Dr. Matthews had whispered to Ava during one of their private consultations. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. This is the first real progress we've seen. The breakthrough came on a particularly difficult evening when Charlotte Gray had cornered Ethan at a charity gala, publicly pressing him about their engagement. Timeline while Gregory watched with calculating eyes. Ethan had returned to his office in a black mood, his jaw clenched so tightly Ava feared he might shatter his teeth. "They think I'm weak," he said, loosening his tie with sharp, angry movements. "Gregory is already meeting with board members. Charlotte's father is making political moves based on our supposed future marriage. And I can't even," he trailed off, but Ava understood. She approached him slowly, her movements deliberate and calming. "May I?" she asked, her hands hovering near his shoulders. Ethan nodded curtly, but when her palms made contact with the tense muscles of his neck, something shifted. Instead of his usual rigid stillness, he leaned into her touch. A soft sound escaped his throat, and suddenly his hands were covering hers, pressing them closer against his skin. "Ava," he whispered, her name sounding different on his lips than it ever had before. The air between them changed, crackling with an electricity that had nothing to do with medical treatment and everything to do with the two damaged souls who had found something unexpected in each other's brokenness. "This isn't part of the therapy," Ava breathed, even as she found herself unable to pull away. "No," Ethan agreed, turning in his chair so they faced each other. "It's not." For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Roland reached out and touched someone because he wanted to. Not because doctors had ordered it. His fingers traced the curve of Ava's jaw with a reverence that made her knees weak. "You fixed me," he said, wonder coloring his voice. "I didn't think it was possible, but you actually fixed me." Their first kiss was tentative, testing, but when Ava responded with equal hunger, years of suppressed longing exploded between them. They made love that night on the leather couch in his office, the city lights painting their entwined bodies in silver and gold. For Ava, it was a revelation of passion she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. For Ethan, it was proof that he was finally, completely whole. But their secret couldn't remain hidden forever. Dr. Harris, Gregory's paid informant, had been watching the building's security footage. The next morning, grainy images of Ethan and Ava together were sitting on Gregory's desk alongside a detailed report of their therapeutic sessions. Gregory's smile was sharp as a blade when he called. "His nephew's office?" "Emergency board meeting this afternoon, Ethan. I think it's time we discussed your unorthodox medical treatments. The shareholders have some concerns about your judgment." Meanwhile, Charlotte Gray stood in her father's study, her engagement ring glittering as she crushed the photographs of Ethan with another woman in her manicured fist. "Daddy," she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "I think it's time we reminded Mr. Roland exactly what he stands to lose if he continues this sordid affair with the help." The trap was closing around them, but Ethan and Ava, lost in their newfound connection, had no idea how quickly their world was about to shatter. As Ethan held her close that morning, breathing in the scent of her hair, he whispered promises of a future neither of them knew was already being stolen from them. "I love you, Ava Collins," he said against her temple. "I'm going to find a way for us to be together, properly, forever." Ava smiled, believing in the fairy tale for just a moment longer. Unaware that fairy tales rarely survived in the real world of corporate warfare and family vendettas. The emergency board meeting was a carefully orchestrated execution. Gregory had spent months preparing for this moment, and every piece was now perfectly positioned on his chessboard. The boardroom at Roland Medical felt like a courtroom as Ethan entered, his spine straight despite knowing he was walking into an ambush. The photographs were waiting for him on the polished mahogany table, spread out like accusations. Images of him and Ava in his office, her hands on his shoulders, their lips meeting, their bodies intertwined on the leather couch. Each picture more damning than the last. "Gentlemen, ladies," Gregory began, his voice carrying just the right note of disappointed authority, "I present to you our CEO's idea of medical treatment. paying a temporary nurse to engage in sexual conduct during company time on company property. The murmurs around the table grew louder as Gregory continued his assault. Dr. Harris has provided testimony that Mr. Roland has been using company resources to fund what amounts to prostitution, disguised as therapy for a condition that multiple specialists have declared untreatable. Ethan's jaw clenched as he watched his uncle destroy everything he had built. Those sessions were legitimate medical treatment overseen by Dr. Matthews, and you know it. Dr. Matthews, who conveniently disappeared back to Switzerland the moment questions were raised. Charlotte's father, Senator Gray, leaned forward with predatory interest. How very convenient. Henry Roland, despite his advanced age, commanded the room from the head of the table. His weathered hands gripped his walking stick as he studied the photographs with disgust. Ethan, his grandfather's voice was heavy with disappointment. Is this how you honor the Roland name? By paying some street girl to play whore in your office? The words hit Ethan like physical blows, but it was the next revelation that nearly brought him to his knees. What our young CEO doesn't know, Gregory said with malicious satisfaction, is that his little nurse has been reporting everything back to us. Every session, every word, every weakness. Ms. Collins has been quite helpful. In documenting your condition, the door opened and Ava walked in, her face pale but her eyes determined. She carried a thick folder and a recording device that made Ethan's blood turn to ice. Is this true? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ava met his gaze steadily. Yes, it's true. I've been recording everything. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Ethan felt the walls of his world crashing down as the woman he loved confirmed his worst fears. But then Ava opened the folder and placed several documents on the table. I recorded everything, she said louder, addressing the room, including Mr. Gregory Roland's offer to pay me $50,000 to seduce his nephew and document his sexual inadequacy, including Charlotte Gray's promises to have my grandmother's medical care terminated if I didn't cooperate, including Dr. Harris, fabricating medical reports to support false claims about Ethan's condition. The silence that followed was deafening. Ava pressed play on the recording device, and Gregory's voice filled the room. The goal is simple, Miss Collins. We need evidence that Ethan is unfit to lead this company. Seduce him, record everything, and we'll take care of your financial problems permanently. Charlotte's sharp intake of breath was audible as her father's political machinations were exposed. Henry Roland's face had turned an alarming shade of red as he realized how thoroughly he had been manipulated. I've also been working with the FBI, Ava continued, her voice growing stronger. Fraud, extortion, and conspiracy charges are being filed against everyone involved in this scheme. Except for Ethan, who was as much a victim as I was. Gregory lunged forward, his composure finally cracking. You little bitch, do you have any idea what you've done? But it was too late. FBI agents were already entering the boardroom, led by Agent Sarah Chen, who had been investigating the Roland family's financial irregularities for months. Gregory Roland, Charlotte Gray, Senator Gray, Dr. Harris, you're all under arrest, Agent Chen announced as handcuffs clicked into place. In the chaos that followed, Ethan found himself alone with Ava and his grandfather. Henry Roland looked older than his 90 years as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. I'm sorry, boy, Henry said quietly. I thought I was protecting the family name. Instead, I nearly destroyed it. Ethan barely heard him. His attention was focused entirely on Ava, who stood before him like a warrior who had just won an impossible battle. Why? Why did you do this? You could have taken their money and disappeared. Ava smiled, tears streaming down her face. Because someone once told me that I broke something inside him and that I had to fix it or pay for it. But what he didn't understand is that he fixed something inside me too. You taught me what it feels like to be truly loved, Ethan, and I wasn't about to let anyone destroy that. She pulled out one final document from her folder. Dr. Matthews left this before he returned to Switzerland. Your condition was never permanent, Ethan. It was psychological trauma from years of medical abuse and family manipulation. The fact that you responded to human touch with me proves that you were never broken at all. You were just waiting for the right person to help you heal. Ethan crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms with a desperation that spoke of nearly losing everything that mattered. I love you, he whispered against her hair. "I love you so much it terrifies me. I love—" "You too," she whispered back, "and we're going to be okay. Your grandmother's medical bills are covered by the settlement from the FBI case. And more importantly, you're free to live your life however you choose." 6 months later, Ethan and Ava stood in a small church in Brooklyn, surrounded by friends who had become family. Ruth, healthier than she had been in years thanks to proper medical care, beamed from the front row as her granddaughter married the man who had shown her that love could heal even the deepest wounds, Henry Roland. Despite everything that had happened, walked Ava down the aisle, having developed a genuine fondness for the woman who had saved his grandson and his family's empire. "You know," Ethan said, as they swayed together during their first dance as husband and wife, "I used to think that one accidental touch ruined my life." Ava smiled up at him, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "And now I think it saved it." As the music played and their loved ones celebrated around them, Ethan Roland finally understood that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most unlikely accidents. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to trust someone with your brokenness, they show you that you were never truly broken at all. The end asterisk, like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.